Some stories, they slip between the cracks of time. They are misfiled, misplaced. Sometimes they are erased on purpose. We like to think that history is a straight line, a record of things that definitely happened. But history is full of shadows. And sometimes a forgotten case forces its way back into the light.
There is a specific kind of darkness that falls over New York when the depression takes hold. It isn't just the lack of light, it's the lack of hope. In 1932, the only place that kept the gears of the city turning was the Grand Central Telegraph Office. Day and night, the Night Typists worked. Young women and men paid pennies to tap out the country's secrets. They were ghosts already, hunched figures in the industrial gloom. And then the real disappearances began. 5 workers in quick succession, gone without a trace. The police called them runaways, deserters. But Mr. Henry Lowell, the supervisor, knew better. They were too meticulous to run, too poor to vanish. Lowell came to realize that the city wasn't swallowing them randomly. It was an appointment. Every single missing person logged out their final message at the precise same time, 2:14 a.m. The last messages they sent were always addressed to non-existent places, demolished buildings, defunct businesses. It was the first sign that this wasn't coincidence. This was a ritual. The file landed on the desk of Detective Harold Kingsley. Kingsley was a man built for the shadows, a quiet veteran of the Great War who understood patterns. He didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed that every action leaves a fingerprint. His first discovery was the logs. Why would an experienced typist send a message to a vacant lot? He consulted the company's master logs and found something curious. The actual content of those final 5 telegrams, hidden behind the impossible addresses, was identical. It wasn't standard text. It was a block of simple, repeating numbers. Kingsley realized the addresses weren't destinations. They were keys. The names of the derelict buildings, the Astor's, Greenway text, corresponded to specific numbers in the old company archives, a rudimentary cipher. The code pointed not to a location, but to a time, 2:10 a.m. to 2:14 a.m., the window when the real signal was being sent. It wasn't a message out, it was a message in. And all the workers who vanished had complained about the same thing, a tapping sound in the wall. That wasn't Morse code, but sounded like a persistent thud coming from the basement level. The basement of the telegraph office was a catacomb of decay. Kingsley found a small, walled-off section behind the ancient boilers, a space Lowell insisted had been sealed for decades. Kingsley broke through the flimsy brickwork. Inside, he found a hidden room, not a nest of spirits, but a professional station, an older, silent telegraph machine, a primitive reel recorder, and most damningly, tools. Not digging tools, but surgical tools, neatly cleaned. The key to the whole mystery wasn't the machine itself, it was the wires. They ran from the machine, through a small hole in the foundation, and disappeared into a forgotten maintenance tunnel that sliced beneath the city. Kingsley consulted the municipal records. That tunnel wasn't just old, it ran directly through the site of the catastrophic 1908 subway collapse, the unofficial grave of 25 workers. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. The tunnel wasn't a lair for the dead, it was a perfect, soundproofed operating theater for the living. Kingsley didn't call for backup. He wanted the Night Typists caught in the act. He returned to the basement at 1:50 a.m. and slipped into the tunnel, following the taut telegraph wire like a thread through a labyrinth. The air grew heavy with the smell of strong chemicals, not rot, but cleaning agents, used to wipe away biological evidence. He found the side chamber half a mile in. It wasn't the work of madmen, but of efficiency. Inside, he found the belongings of the missing workers, their ID badges, torn coats, and their final shift notes. He checked his watch. 2:10 a.m. Suddenly, the silent, abandoned telegraph machine in the chamber began to click to life, vibrating violently. It wasn't sending Morse code. It was a simple, repetitive pulse, a distraction signal overriding the office wires above. It was the lure. He heard voices ahead, low, professional. Kingsley crept forward and came upon a large makeshift operating station. There were lights powered by a generator, medical bags, and a gurney. Two figures in clean, nondescript work clothes stood over a third figure whose arms were strapped down. It wasn't a ghost operation. It was a ghoulish business. The figures weren't survivors of the 1908 collapse. They were doctors, or more accurately, grave robbers posing as surgeons. Kingsley realized the terrifying truth. The missing typists were the desperate and the forgotten. They were chosen because their disappearances would never be investigated. The 2:14 a.m. cipher was a way for the operators, likely corrupt medical professionals or black market organ harvesters, to signal to an accomplice upstairs that a new victim was secured and the extraction window was open. The 1908 tunnel was perfect, isolated, hidden, and easy to clean. Kingsley raised his weapon and fired a warning shot. The chamber exploded into chaos. The two men fled instantly, vanishing into the network of subtunnels, leaving behind their victim, Frank Malloy, strapped to the gurney, unconscious, a fresh surgical scar already visible. Kingsley called for backup, but the men were long gone. The authorities arrived to find the chamber empty, save for the tools and the traumatized survivor. They arrested Frank Malloy's attacker 2 weeks later, using the recovered surgical tools to trace the man back to an illicit morgue. The ring was broken. The tunnels were finally sealed with concrete, and the remaining missing workers were declared deceased. The story never made the front page. The police, fearing panic and lawsuits, issued a statement claiming the disappearances were related to workplace fraud and underground trafficking, quietly burying the terrifying clinical details. But Detective Harold Kingsley filed his report. He closed the case with a dark observation. The city never forgot the dead buried in its foundation. It was the living that the city devoured, one desperate soul at 2:14 a.m. at a time. And that, detective, is the real fear. Not the monster in the dark, but the man in the suit who knows exactly how to make you disappear. The Great Depression hit Chicago like a hammer, but beneath the surface, the bootlegging empires still ran hot. 5 years after the St. Valentine's Day massacre, the city was officially clean. But Detective Miles Corbin, 40, a man whose coat pockets were permanently stained with whiskey and cigar ash, knew the truce was just a deep freeze. The mob didn't vanish. They just learned to wear better suits and pay better cops.
Corbin received a call that shouldn't have existed. A young, nervous ledger clerk named Leo the Pencil Finn from the defunct S&M Moving Company, a known Capone front, had turned up dead in an abandoned meatpacking warehouse. Not murdered by bullets, but meticulously frozen solid and left standing upright. The official police report would call it hypothermia, but the crime scene was sealed from the inside. Corbin noted a single bizarre detail. A small antique brass door key was clutched in Leo's frozen hand. Leo Finn was a nobody, but his death was a loud statement. Corbin found that Leo had been working on a highly specific set of books, not for booze, but for real estate acquisitions made right after the 1929 massacre. The mob wasn't just moving booze, they were moving dirt. Corbin tracked down Leo's sister, Clara. She was terrified, but certain Leo kept a ledger, a second set of books that detailed names, dates, and bank numbers for every property the local syndicate had seized, including the very warehouse where the massacre took place. But the ledger was gone. All that was left in Leo's room was a map of the city's underground steam tunnels and train lines. The map had a single location circled near the old Union stockyards, a place Leo had marked with the number 7. Corbin realized the brass key in Leo's hand wasn't random. It was a series. Leo hadn't been killed for the ledger itself, but for the location of the remaining keys needed to decode or access something vital. Corbin found a list of property deeds associated with the number 7 in Leo's work files. They were 7 small, unremarkable parcels of land, all purchased cheaply right after the 1929 incident. Each had a tiny defunct building on it, a storage unit, an old laundry, a shuttered barber shop. When Corbin visited the location marked 7 on the map, a disused boiler room beneath the stockyards, he found the second key hidden inside the pressure gauge. Corbin spent the next week chasing down the other 5 locations. At each site, he was met with silence, hostile locals, and a subtle sense of being watched. He recovered the remaining keys, each one hidden in a mundane object: a drain pipe, a fire hydrant base, the heel of a discarded shoe. He went back to the old S&M Moving Company warehouse, the real site of the massacre. He realized the 7 properties, when marked on a city grid, formed a perfect circle around the warehouse district. The 7 keys were the only things that could open a hidden sub-level vault beneath the old S&M building. A vault installed by Capone's engineers, not to store liquor, but to store the dirtiest secret of the cleanup. Corbin entered the vault using the 7 keys. It was small, cold, and utterly barren save for 2 things: the missing ledger, filled with names of prominent city officials, judges, and police captains who had been paid to turn a blind eye to the mob's real estate expansion, and a large, professionally installed refrigeration unit. Corbin opened the refrigerator unit. Inside, he didn't find frozen bodies. He found hundreds of gallons of untraceable human blood plasma, harvested and stored over 5 years. Leo Finn hadn't been killed for the ledger. He was killed because he discovered the chilling truth. The blood on the walls of the massacre site wasn't just cleaned up. It was harvested and sold to hospitals during a medical supply shortage, creating a permanent, untraceable black market fortune that funded the mob's legitimate expansion into real estate. Leo, a simple accountant, tried to stop the sales, and they silenced him by using their own preservation method, freezing him like a cut of meat. Corbin had the evidence, but the names in the ledger were too powerful. He knew that taking this to the chief of police in Chicago would mean his immediate disappearance. He destroyed the refrigeration unit, leaking the plasma into the Chicago sewers. He took the ledger, left the keys, and walked out of the S&M building alive, but spiritually frozen. He never filed the report. The fear wasn't about bullets anymore. It was about the rot in the very foundations of the city. A rot bought and paid for by blood money.